Hello, everybody. My name is Gilda Ross. I am the Glenbard Student and Community Projects Coordinator. I'm delighted that you could join us for this very important conversation. We are the anxious generation with anxious children, and this topic is really in the forefront of so many parents' minds, school staff as well. So I'm delighted for the gift of your time. I want you to know that we honor that and we are grateful for your attention here today. And our ask of you is to please share this resource. It's a very, very busy time of year, but when we all come together and like us on social media, call a friend, we're really, really grateful for that support. And speaking of support, I want to make mention of one of our sponsors that is here doing the introduction today. Sherilyn Hebel is with Kids Matter, and they are one of the annual sponsors of the Glenbard Parent Series, the GPS Parent Series now, and we couldn't be more grateful to them. Quickly, before we begin, I want to mention some of the upcoming programs that I want you to take note of. It is, again, a very, very busy time of year. Next week, we will be welcoming a Glenbard alum, Dr. Amishi Jha. She has written an important book called Peak Mind. She'll be talking about how to enhance your attention, your focus, and your performance to become your best self in all areas of life, athletics, learning in terms of your resilience. So you won't want to miss that next Tuesday on the 18th at noon and at 7 p.m. And then the following week, as we kick off Live Life Well Week at the Glenbard Schools, Duncan Kirkwood will be joining us with an inspirational talk. He'll be talking about the critical skills to unleash perseverance, passion, purpose, and joy. Prior to that presentation, please do join us in person if you are able. We have a health resource fair that will be happening from 6:15 to 7 in the Glenbard West Library. Prior to that program, at 7 o'clock, it will become a hybrid. You'll want to listen in and join us either way. Another opportunity that you definitely do not want to miss. Sarah Ward and Jessica Minahan have both been with us separately in the past. They are together, and it is a very special opportunity. They will be doing another hybrid event. Come in person if at all possible to this extended workshop, which will last from 7 to 9 p.m. at Glenbard South. If you can't, it will be available on Zoom as well. But tell anyone who has issues with executive function, organizational skills, challenging behavior. We have two experts, truly two amazing experts on the planet to discuss this topic. February 27th, Thursday, 7 to 9 p.m. only. Sarah Vinson is a psychiatrist with Morehouse College. She'll be talking about how to support your child's mental health when things aren't okay. That's on the 6th at noon and 7 p.m. Without further ado, we're going to get right into it. So much to talk about. And so I'm going to turn it over to Sherilyn Hibble. She will do the introductions. Thank you, Sherilyn. She's the Director of Programming at Kids Matter.
Thank you, Gilda, and thank you, Amy, for being here and everyone who is joining us. I am with Kids Matter. We are a nonprofit serving Naperville and surrounding DuPage and Will counties with a mission to build resilient kids who say no to destructive choices and yes to their endless possibilities. And it is our joy to partner with GPS because riding right along with that same mission of just wanting to provide families in our community with the resources to just build resiliency, happiness, joy, kindness. And that is why we are thrilled to have Amy with us today. Amy Blankson is the co-founder and chief evangelist of the Digital Wellness Institute and the best-selling author of The Future of Happiness. A graduate of Harvard and the Yale School of Management, she is the only person to receive a Point of Light Award from 2 U.S. presidents. Amy is also a former member of the UN Global Happiness Council, a fellow of the World Innovation Organization, and a featured professor in Oprah's Happiness E-Course, a regular contributor to Forbes as well. Her current work focuses on how to cultivate happiness and well-being in a hyper-connected world. You might also know Amy as Amy the Unicorn from her brother, Sean Akers' infamous TED Talk on the science of happiness. So please join me in giving Amy a warm, warm welcome. Thank you so much for being here, Amy.
Thank you so much, Sherilyn. I am honored and thrilled to get to be here with the GPS series. This is incredible and what an amazing resource for the community. So thank you for all that you do, Sherilyn, as well with Kids Matter. As Gilda mentioned, today we're talking about from anxiety to action, a parent's guide to navigating AI, social media, and the digital future. We're going to conquer it all here in the next 45 minutes. And the goal is really to help you move from being part of the anxious generation into somebody who knows what to do for your children, how to help them to thrive in the future. I come to this not only as a practitioner of digital wellness and digital well-being with a background in positive psychology, but I'm also the product of public school educators, a professor of neuroscience. My husband, my brother, and my sister-in-law are all in the field of positive psychology. And I'm a parent. So I'm with you. I have three beautiful teenage girls who are in the midst of a lot of what many of you are struggling with right now. So I'm coming to you very authentically and honestly as somebody who is working through this myself. As we all know, our worlds are incredibly complicated. I've already mentioned to you that I study digital well-being. I also happen to be a tech developer, so I feel the tension of trying to develop products that are for our digital world while also maintaining digital well-being and wellness for ourselves. My husband on the far right there is an adolescent medicine specialist. So he spends all day, every day talking to young people about their digital worlds and has some incredible experiences, but he's also a gamer himself. And then my three children. Most people assume that as a digital wellness expert that I have held off on giving my children phones for years and years. But the truth is that all three of my children have heard me talk about digital wellness ad nauseum at this point, and all three of them are now content creators. My daughter in orange is a filmmaker, my daughter in red is an app designer, and the little one in pink in the middle has two YouTube channels that have thousands of followers and an Etsy store. So know this, I introduce my family to you, both so that you know that I'm an authentic leader who is talking from the heart, but also so that you can see the duality that we face in thriving in the digital era. Finding that balance is something that is an everyday operation. We're also in the middle of what I call the 30% shift. Since the beginning of COVID until now, the amount of time that we started to spend on screens went up 30%. And when COVID started, we all thought, okay, that time will go back down and then we will be back in balance. We won't be spending all day, every day on remote work or school. Turns out that shift never shifted back. So we've actually increased the amount of time we spend on devices by 30%, which means we've decreased the amount of time that we're sleeping, interacting, doing other things by 30%. And this has huge ramifications on us as a culture, on our parenting style, on the way that our kids grow up, and also on the future that they're going to be facing. So as we're looking at this duality of the digital world, the two things, really three things that we're holding in balance here is a change in knowledge, a change in communication styles, and a change in creativity. And while there's pros and cons of all of these things, they do present a few issues and challenges that I think many of you will relate to. I wanted to share with you a few of the stats that have come out in the last 2 years that I think are relevant to many of you. I know some of you have younger children, some have older children, some have college children as well. So hopefully this will catch the gamut of different age groups. But 70% of teens now own their phone by the age of 13. By the age of 18, that number has jumped up to 93%. 50% of teens report that they are online almost constantly, often on multiple devices. So maybe watching TV and looking at their phone, maybe on their computer, but also gaming at the same time. 8 hours, 39 minutes is the average amount of time that teens are spending on their screens. 62% of them are using social media regularly, daily, and 84% are regular. They're receiving 237 messages and notifications daily, which is a lot, right? And 50% of those teens feel or admit that their parents' amount of restrictions on their devices is just about right. So if that's an average, you have to assume that there's a good number who think their parents are completely wrong and a fair few who think that their parents are doing okay. So that being said, We have a growing list of concerns that come alongside of that. We know AI anxiety or tech anxiety are huge. We know depression, eating disorders, cyberbullying, lack of sleep, texting while driving, sexting, phishing, pornography, online dating, and now AI. These are all the things that we as parents feel on our shoulders. We're trying to protect our children. It makes us nervous, and we know that it's a losing battle in many ways. So, what do we do about this? Today's talk is all about helping you reframe that anxiety, which is real, into action, what you can actually do about it. And I want to emphasize that digital wellness is not about guilt, and it's definitely not about fear. It's about awareness and empowerment. And you'll hear that drumbeat from me throughout today. We know that the digital landscape is changing. I've been studying the intersection of happiness and technology now for about 19 years. And I will tell you that when I first started my book, The Future of Happiness, back in 2014, the topic at the time was, will social media destroy the fabric of our society? That's still a concern, but over time it became remote school became the dominating force, and now it's AI. Within the last year, the number of students who are using Gen AI went from 50% up to 89% of kids are using AI of some sort. That is an astronomical increase in tech adoption. And the things that they're doing with this AI differs for a lot of kids. Some are getting information, some are brainstorming, some are getting help with schoolwork, some are doing creative things like making pictures or images or music or sounds. Some are using it to get jobs. But the one thing that is a common denominator here is that kids need digital literacy to thrive in the future job market. In fact, AI is being called the #1 most important skill coming out of schools today. So if we're not teaching to AI, we're not using AI, there's a real risk of getting behind. And yet, misinformation, deepfakes, AI generated content challenges our students' ability to think critically. And for educators and parents, that's top of mind as well. So, how does all of this digital world and the digital changes, is particularly in the age of AI, affecting our children? There's three factors that I wanted to raise for you that I think are emerging trends. One is that there's more hyper personalized content, which is nice when somebody knows your name and they know what you like. But it also means that for our children, that the advertising market has more influence than ever before in the attention economy. If you've never heard of the attention economy, there was a film that came out in 2018 called The Social Dilemma. And in it, one of the founders of The Social Dilemma, Tristan Harris, talks about how we're living in an era where the goal of technology is really a race to the bottom of the brainstem. The idea that if we can capture attention, that it actually translates into dollars. And the more that you know who your customer is, well, the more dollars you can generate. So knowing this, AI now has the capacity to really get to know you and your children better and offer products that are very tailored, but it also means that it's more distracting. The second factor is that there's a rise of AI tutors and learning tools. And we're not sure yet if this is going to be a friend or a foe. 90% of students who use ChatGPT find it more beneficial than actually working with a tutor. A recent study also found that students who are using this hyper personalized AI for learning have a 30% higher retention rate in school. So there's some pros, but we also know it's changing the dynamic of how things are working for our students. And third, mental health and relationships are changing. We knew mental health was a big issue before. We have a new player on the field. And I think that as we're looking at the access to mental health resources, that's absolutely going to increase, but they're not human beings, they are AI bots. And there's not a lot of regulation. So if there's one message that I want you as parents to think about, if you haven't thought about yet, is where your students are turning to for support and guidance in their lives. There are a number of apps that exist now that are emerging, like character.ai, that are completely unregulated. In fact, in the last month, we've had even further deregulation of this market, which means that there are no standards, just as we're seeing on Instagram and Facebook. We're also seeing it across news channels that we as parents have to be more vigilant and aware and informed about what types of content our kids are accessing, where their go-tos for learning and particularly mental health resources are at. So enough doom and gloom, enough anxiety. I wanted to just hit those touch points with you because I know they're on your mind already. But where I really want to go today is to give you the 3 pillars of raising digitally wise kids. So the first one is that we as parents need to teach digital literacy, not just screen time limits. For a long time, the American Academy of Pediatrics really emphasized 2 hours or less of entertainment related screen time. Turns out these trends and the stats keep changing. It used to be 1 hour, and then it was 2 hours, and then COVID hit, and all of a sudden our language became, well, just don't be on your devices all day long, right? Hopefully. And we tried to pull back from that. But what we know now is that screen time limits are a very squishy metric, meaning that what is screen time? What are you doing with screen time? All screen time is not equal. So kids feel the confusion, and we know that where you have a gray area, kids will run as far as they can to try to create their own opportunities or to find wiggle room in rules. So beyond yes or no to screens, kids don't just need to hear rules, they need to understand why rules exist. So that's about teaching the digital literacy. And the goal here is to focus on how the technology is being used and not just on how much time. One of the things that we talk about often at the Digital Wellness Institute is this propensity for us to swing between polar opposites. Either we see our kids are fully digitally addicted over here, and then we swing to a digital detox. We're swearing off social media, we're taking your phone away, and it's one or the other two extremes. We know with our teenagers, though, what's actually working and more realistic for sustainable behavior is creating the spot called digital flourishing. And I define digital flourishing as that sweet spot where you are in control of your technology, not the other way around. So you define when you get interrupted. You define when you focus, as opposed to just letting distractions come at you. And for a number of students, we find that language to be really helpful. We even went so far as to identify all the different domains in which our lives today are being affected by digital devices. And what we started with was actually a wheel that looked very different from this. We took the initial wheel and we outlined all of the harms in our lives and we categorized all the harms. And then I went back and I looked at all the research that I know from the field of positive psychology. And I said, the problem here is not that we don't know the harms. The problem is that we don't know the solutions. We don't know what an ideal or positive view of a digital life might look like. What would it be like to be digitally in balance? And so that's how we developed this flourishing wheel. We began to look at metrics of what are good standards for what our life could or should look like. And at the bottom of your screen, you'll see either a QR code or a link that could be a resource for you where you can actually go take a quick 5-minute survey. It's actually student friendly as well. So you can find out how your digital wellness is doing and how it compares to others in the world. It's a really helpful base metric to just give you a little bit of information. But here's what you need to know overall about digital literacy in your kids. First of all, there's a myth of digital parenting, of perfect digital parenting. I don't have it right. None of us actually get it right. We're all learning in this space. So the research is coming out as fast as it can, and we're trying to share it as fast as we can, but there's a lot of gray areas for all of us. Second, all screen time is not the same. I mentioned this earlier, but one of the things that I've learned from my pediatric friends is that today's best measure of screen time is what you're doing when you're online and what you're doing offline, not the total amount of entertainment related screen time. Because what is entertainment anyway? Is learning entertainment? Is talking with friends entertainment? Is talking with family across the world entertainment? It's too tricky. But what we can do is say, okay, are you sleeping at night? Are you eating well? Are you getting your homework done? Are you consuming more than you create or creating more than you consume? Are you getting out to hang out with your friends? And all of these factors give us a picture of whether or not our kids are actually using the amount of screen time properly. When our children are little, when there's toddlers, you can easily recognize the signs of symptoms of when you've gone overboard with screen time. And you can tell that by trying to take the device away from the child. If they begin to throw what I call a tech tantrum, you know they've had too much, right? But as we get older, teenagers in particular, and even ourselves as adults, it's much harder to recognize that moment where you begin to feel like you are less effective, less focused, less happy. And sometimes it takes accountability or support systems of families and communities to help us identify, hey, you're reaching that point where you're out of balance. Let's come back into balance. The third thing is that all kids are not the same. We know there's developmental and temperamental differences that shape digital tolerance, and they also shape digital behaviors. So, for instance, my husband actually had a patient a few years ago, and the patient was not neurotypical. He was autistic and really struggled with social interactions, and he had been bullied online. And his parents wanted to take his device away from him, but the student said that that was his only path to friendship. And so for him, it was actually better to have a device because that was his way of connecting to people in a way that he could connect with others, even if it meant a risk of bullying. So what they did is they taught him, how do you prevent bullying? How do you move past it? How do you develop the self-confidence to exist in a world where we know that digital devices are going to be key to you being able to connect with other people? So there's some interesting little subtleties here that are important. Lastly, is getting to know the lingo of the digital world these days. With increased complexity, our language needs to evolve, particularly as parents. When we talk about tech, what kind of tech? When we talk about gaming, that's a whole universe. I'll share with you here in a minute. Devices, even AI, doesn't mean the same thing. And so really defining what we're talking about and learning the differences can give you more empowerment as a parent. So speaking of language, I wanted to share with you this interesting chart that if you have a child who is a gamer, you may recognize some of the words on here. If you don't have a gamer, you might feel completely lost in this sea of words. But this is the universe of games, gaming, and gamers, all different things. And we have everything from single shooter games, role-playing games, sport games. We have party games online. We have puzzle games. And you might find as you look at this list that maybe you've never thought of yourself as a gamer, but maybe you like those puzzle games online. Maybe you like to play Sudoku, or maybe you like to do social media games. So beginning to identify where you fit in this universe can help you identify that it's not all one thing. Your child might exist in the top right quadrant or the left quadrant or all of the quadrants. But if you have the language for what these young people are playing, they will listen to you more and give you more credence that you know what you're talking about. Second, the second pillar for raising digital thriving young people, building pathways and boundaries simultaneously. In the language of digital wellness and well-being, most of the focus you have always heard about is on boundaries. We need guardrails, and absolutely we do. But the emerging conversation is now focusing on what we call pathways to privilege. Our young people want to know that when they can get a phone or a device, or when they can get social media, or when they can earn more game time. And what they often hear from parents is no. End of discussion. And what we're finding to be a very effective strategy for parents is to begin to say, hey, I know you want that phone. So here's how you can prove to me that you can handle the responsibility. You know, we'll do X, Y, and Z. Maybe it's building up chores. Maybe it's taking an online course. Maybe it's having a series of conversations. Maybe it's seeing that you can walk the dog and feed the dog on a regular basis before you take on a new responsibility. But this pathways to privilege is a really important concept for the young people. And it's not just one pathway to privilege. There's so many different levels of devices that as parents we have to think about. Smartwatches, iPads, phones, social media, laptops, gaming, AI. When do we introduce all of this? I can't answer that question for you, but I am going to give you a few resources to help you think through and create a plan for your own family. And for each one of those, coming up with a series of ways that your young person can demonstrate that they are ready for responsibility can be really powerful and motivating to get them to do other things you want them to do, like getting good grades or sports or, getting outside and playing a little bit more. But alongside of that, and I love this image here with the guardrails along the paths of privilege, is what rules are you going to put in place up front? Don't wait until after and there's a problem. Before you give the device or before you start the interaction, what rules do you have about it? Phones at the dinner table, games during homework time, going to bed at a certain time, our devices in the bedroom. And if they violate the rule, what is going to be the consequence? Again, as parents, sometimes we come up with those consequences on the fly, and they usually involve digital detox. Take it away. That's the end of the story. But is there something else that could be more helpful to them? And is there a time limit? Like, you've lost your privilege because, you didn't use the site appropriately, or I found foul language, or you were bullying somebody else. That is not a forever change. So how can they earn back your trust and your responsibility? Because that's what's going to motivate them to keep trying. So a few more strategies on getting your kids to listen, because this is the heart of that hard conversation. And my husband hears it all the time in his practice is, I can't take away my kid's device, or my kids won't listen to me. So what is the point? Before any of this conversation happens, you have an opportunity as a parent to develop some social capital. Spend time and play together with your kids, particularly if there's a game, say like Fortnite, and you've never actually played Fortnite before. It can be very hard for you to create rules around Fortnite because Fortnite's a communal game. Let's say that your young person is playing on Fortnite and you want them to come down for dinner. Well, it turns out that everybody in the game is actually relying on your child. The game lasts 21 minutes. So if you want your child to listen to you, say, hey, you can play one game. We're having dinner in 30 minutes. You need to be back down here. Or, hey, let me hop on and I'll play the game with you real quick. Like, can I get in there and have fun too? You would earn so much social capital from your kids. I did it myself. I'm horrible at games, but I made a fool of myself and the kids loved it. And after they saw how bad I was, they never invited me again, and that's okay. So they learned that that was important to me. Second is creating psychological safety. If you want your kid to be open with you and to be honest with you and there's a problem, you have to ask them about other things before there's a problem. Hey, how are things going with your friends? Like, what are y'all talking about these days? Did you get any funny memes from them? So being a part of the world. And one of the things our family likes to do is we have a family group chat. There's an infinite number of gifs and memes that get shared, funny stories, Instagram reels, questions about the day, and did you do your homework? All of that builds up to the moment where when there's a problem, they know that we're coming alongside them. And last is this idea of guidance versus control. So this is authoritative versus authoritarian, if you are familiar with the love and logic language. This idea of supporting critical decision making rather than dictating the rules, particularly for older teenagers. We know younger children may not have the executive function and they need more hard rules, but as your children grow, you're going to need to help them understand if you want them to listen. So I know you're ready for this. A couple of boundaries that we can think about for your devices for your kids as guardrails. Think about these in terms of three things. One is time-based, when your tech is going to be used, first thing in the morning, in the evening, at dinner. The second is content-based. Are they allowed to use certain apps versus other apps? And why are we using it? If it's for school, if it's not for school. Third is relationship-based. Are you using this to connect with your cousin that you don't get to see very often, or with friends and you really have this fun relationship? Does that change how much you get to use the technology? And then creating some ground rules. Now, I'm going to come back here in a second. We'll summarize how you go about creating this master plan. But the ground rules that I want to make sure to cover here is that you always have your child's password to their phone. And I put here ground rules and the rationale behind them because your child may not want to give you their phone password. As a parent, you can actually lock their phone so that they can't change their phone password, but it truly is a safety issue. If you need to find them, if there is bullying going on, you need to be able to access and get to that device to make sure that they're safe. The second is introducing this idea of spot checks. Kids do not like spot checks, but this is something that I feel pretty passionate that it's important to establish upfront that you bought the phone. It does not belong to them. If they're putting things out there in public, then it is not a private conversation. So these are things that as parents, we need to be able to monitor. And occasionally, time to time, in a random moment, we may ask for your device. And as part of your privilege, this is something that as my parental right, I'm going to be checking to make sure that you're being appropriate on your device. I would say that this is important all the way through high school. When kids go off to college, of course, they will be off on their own and doing their own things. So this is your training ground to make sure that as things get more thorny and more complicated and more involved, that the students are being appropriate with their devices. This is also the moment where, as a parent, you might catch bullying. And heaven forbid it's your child bullying somebody else or somebody else bullying your child. But that is, my husband and I will go through chat feeds every now and then just to make sure that people are acting appropriately. And yes, we have found multiple instances where that needed to be talked about in advance. The third thing is setting time limits, again, allowing for growth. So it is, do you allow 1 hour on YouTube per day or maybe 15 minutes? Do they have to ask you for more time limits? And then the last is getting a baseline for your digital activity. How can you know if your child starts to go overboard if you don't have a baseline for where they're at today? So if you have not ever done this before, I wanted to just give you a quick tutorial on what this looks like. And yes, I'm happy to share this deck with you afterwards so that you can follow this a little bit more carefully. But for Apple screen time, we've got this way that you can begin to look on the left side, you go into settings, screen time. You actually have to click on app and website activity. And then on the right side of the screen, you'll see something that says show categories. And when you click on the show categories, that shows you how many minutes. So there's a couple little steps there to get to actually seeing your child's screen time limits. If you have never set up screen time, you have to do this before it starts tracking your child's minutes on the device. I would take all of this with a grain of salt, though. Just because it says your child spent 14 hours online one day, it could be that they left an app open or something was running in the background. It also only represents phone time, but there's, as we mentioned earlier, there's gaming time, there's laptops, there might be a desktop, there's all kinds of devices. So this is only one aspect. I have a friend of mine whose daughter loves playing Roblox. Her mom set her Roblox limit on her iPad to 2 hours a day. Turns out that she was spending 4 hours extra on other devices to get a total of 6 hours of Roblox a day. If you're only checking one place, you might miss the other 4 hours of screen time. So keep around a picture. If you're on Android, here is how you get to your settings. You go into your settings, digital well-being and parental controls, and that takes you into your digital well-being tools. So that is a little bit faster and more straightforward for being able to see your total amount of screen time. Again, this is just getting a baseline. So if you measure today, where's your kid at in a week? Where's your kid at in a month or 6 months or on their next birthday? Is that time to bump up their responsibility level or their privilege level? All right, so the third pillar of raising digitally well children in this digital age is modeling. Not a surprise here, but I do think that the number one thing that surprises parents is that their children mimic their behavior. And the hard truth about this parental screen time use is that they often will repeat back the very things that we are doing and saying. This image that you see here is from a photography exhibit, and the photographer's name was Eric Pickersgill. It's an exhibit called Removed, and in it, he has a series of images where he asks real people to model what they typically do with devices at home. So all of these are actors who are pretending using what they typically do at home, but it's pretty authentic here. I could see a device in the little kid's hand and in the mom's hand, and that they're parallel playing in this way that we see all too often. When you see this reflected back, it's so obvious. Oh, yes, that's not what I want to look like. I really want to project that I'm connected and caring and I'm tuned in and we're engaging as a family. But in reality, this is what we might look like. Another challenge that parents often overlook is this idea of phubbing. And if you've never heard of the word phubbing before, I'm going to apologize to you in advance, because after I tell you what it is, you're going to see it everywhere and it's going to drive you nuts. But here it is. Phubbing is phone snubbing. And it is that moment where you're having a great conversation with somebody when all of a sudden they get a text message or a phone call. They pick up their phone, and it's not that message that gets them. It's the next thing that pings on their device while they're looking at their phone. Oh, yeah, I was supposed to pay that bill. And then all of a sudden, they put their device away and they're like, okay, what were we saying again? And all of a sudden, you have been phubbed, phone snubbed, and it hurts because you think, man, I'm standing right here in front of you. And yet you have just prioritized this person or this spam call or this weird, non-human notification over me, and then forgot what we were talking about, right? So here's my challenge to you. In the next 24 hours, I want you to pay attention to phubbing. I want you to look around and see it. And, it might be yourself, it might be your children or your spouse or someone else you work with. Phubbing is everywhere. But one of the things we know that can help our young people to not phub is if we don't phub them or phub in their presence. It's a really hard strategy, but 77% of kids say that their parents, oh, I'm sorry, 77% of parents think their kids are overly dependent on devices, but 40% of kids think their parents are too dependent on devices. So if we're making rules for our kids that we can't stick with ourselves, it might be worth revisiting why that is. A couple opportunities for teachable moments in the span of this, though. I want to encourage you to encourage your young person to have pro-social fun time on their devices, but also acknowledge other responsibilities: grades, sleep, chores, family time. We know sleep is absolutely critical to their performance in school. So of course, if they're on their devices till 11 p.m. at night, it's very hard for them to show up and do other things well as well. Second is to point out poor behavior when you see others doing it. I remember my mother doing this as I was growing up. Every time she saw some child misbehaving in public, she would be like, Amy, I want you to notice this because this is, not good, either behavior or parenting. And so, you would notice it in somebody else's child. So this gives you a teachable moment as a parent. You're out in public, maybe you're at dinner, maybe you're on vacation together, and say, wow, that family, they're all together, but they're not spending time together. That's not who we want to be. This is how we want to act. It's a great reframe. Third is explaining what you're doing when you're on your devices and modeling good choices. The strategy actually comes from preschool teachers, but I love it. And the idea is that when you're a young child and you're in a kindergarten classroom, per se, the teachers will actually dictate what they're doing. Okay, it's snack time. I'm going to give you water. I'm going to give you a snack, and then we're going to lay down for nap time. But as we get older, we make assumptions about what's happening. And one of the things that was so shocking to me as a parent was the summer that I took my kids to the library. We were going to read, did a library challenge about how many books we could read for the summer, and the kids were filling out at the end of summer all the books that they read. And then I asked, well, I read a lot of books this summer. Can I write down the books I read and get a free bookmark? And they said, sure. So I started writing down my books, and I love to read. I'd read 33 books that summer. It was my all-time record. I was so proud. And then my children said, Mom, when were you reading? You're always on your device. And I thought, what do you think I'm doing on my device? I'm reading. And it was this moment of realizing, oh my gosh, they thought I was playing Roblox or Fortnite or whatever, TikTok video that they would be watching. They assumed that's what I would do. So now when I have my device out, particularly in family time, I say, oh man, checking the news. Wow, this thing is going on in the world. Or, oh my gosh, I saw this funny video. Do you want to come join me and watch it with me? Then they know what I'm doing and I pull them into the conversation so it's not just solo behavior. And lastly, owning your bad parenting moments and being willing to shift behavior. Let me be honest and real with you. We said earlier there's no perfect parent. I have my own flaws and faux pas with digital devices. I am not perfect. My kids are so happy to call me out on this. But one of the things I can do to, again, build that social capital is to own these moments and say, you know what? You're right. I'll be better and keep working on it. This is a bonus strategy for you. I said there were 3 pillars to becoming or to raising digitally well kids, but this fourth one I couldn't help but put in, and that is to think forward a little bit as a parent about raising what I call a super thinker. I'm in the throes of writing this new book right now called Super Thinker about the skills that we need to thrive in the age of AI. And the things that I'm learning in the process of writing is that there are so many unique skills that we as humans have that we know AI can't replace or won't replace in the future. And so part of what I want to do with my own children is I want to develop those skills that are their value add in the future, knowing that AI might be better at them in computation. It might be able to create a better Excel spreadsheet, but my children will be empathetic. My children will know how to do reasoning, critical thinking, and all these skills that we've been trying to teach with social emotional learning. They are more important than ever before. The second is helping kids navigate AI with confidence. I want to encourage curiosity instead of fear. I read a study recently that a third of the students who have never tried AI are terrified about the future. And if I want to raise confident, empowered children, I don't want them to be dominated by fear because they don't know what's out there. I would rather teach them, guide them along in the way, and help them co-create the future. So my goal is to actually teach my kids to use AI wisely rather than avoid it. And all this time I'm spending learning about AI these days, I'm pulling them in as well. I want them to see how I'm using it. I want them to dabble. I want to learn from them because they are hearing the latest and greatest information as young people and picking it up like water. So I have a lot to gain from talking with them as well. And then, of course, teaching my kids how to recognize misinformation and or bias, understanding how what they watch on YouTube will create an algorithm that will keep bringing more and more polarized content to them, or being able to, as I saw in the news today, I think there was a whole announcement about Taylor Swift being upset because a fake video had been produced about her criticizing Elon Musk. And these videos will just keep coming. We know as the information gets better, being able to identify misinformation will be a key skill. Today, 50% of students can recognize misinformation or bias, which is actually pretty good, but that means 50% of the time they're wrong. So that's great for them to understand as well that this is something we have to hone. So some practical action coming out of this, talking about tech ad nauseum with your children can be helpful. Give them the language and the tools, the ideas of digital well-being, digital wellness, digital mindfulness, put it in their vocabulary, talk about what it means to you. Have your kids teach you about the tech that they're learning about. It is so helpful. And I'm not just talking about social media, but also how they're creating PowerPoints, how they're writing documents, how they're recreating the way that we edit photos. There's so much to learn there. And encouraging digital creation, that's coding, design, storytelling, art over passive consumption. I believe it's Jeff Bezos who once said that his #1 goal was to create more than he consumes. And I think as the owner of Amazon, that is a powerful statement. So creating more than we consume, how can we help our young people balance there just a little bit better? As we close out here today, though, I know some of you are wrestling with some really serious issues with your young people. You have a lot of concerns. And of course, we don't have time to get to everything here today, but I did want to give you a little guide for how you can think through when you need to go another step to get your young person the help that they need. Some mild warning signs of being out of digital balance might be rubbing your eyes, or having glazed eyes, like you've been on a screen too long, not exercising, back, wrist, neck pain, maybe being extra tired. These are all cues that maybe there's something going on behind the scenes. Moderate warning signs, though, might be your child is getting more irritable. They're having trouble stepping away from their devices. Maybe they have a tech tantrum. Maybe their grades are declining. Those are signs that something bigger is going on. And then the real warning signs are when your child starts to withdraw, when they feel socially isolated, their mood has a significant change, and they might have weight loss or gain. So when these are signs that you are beginning to see, I wanted to give you a few resources that we'll add here in the PDF that you'll get after this that could give you some guidance for where to go for more information. I will tell you in advance that the very first resource I list is a little bit biased. It is my husband's website, but he is one of the best adolescent medicine doctors in the entire country. He works with young people, both on life coaching and also medical coaching to help young people be able to handle digital world better. I'm also wanted to share with you the Digital Wellness Institute and Digital Wellness Lab have great resources, short videos, research papers if you want to learn more, the latest and greatest stats that are coming out. And then I've given you a whole list of tools and guides. I'm going to call out for you the Family Digital Wellness Guide and Tech Planner are where you can go to begin creating a guide for your own family. You can download a template where you can fill in with your family and say, okay, what do we want our rules to be? You co-create the plan together, and it gives you guidelines for, okay, for phones versus AI versus gaming versus, laptops for school. What does that look like? Let's map it out and stick it somewhere in the house so we can all see it. And then lastly, inspiration for you or your young person. These are youth who are leading change and putting digital wellness into their own language by youth for youth, which is a powerful resource for your young people to hear from other people just like them who are trying to live their best life. So I want to stop there. I want to say thank you so much for showing up, for caring, for taking the time to want to be there for your young person and help them to thrive in this digital world. Our goal as parents is really to create these caring, compassionate, insightful digital citizens. And whether our kids like it or not, we know that they need us. So thank you for being invested in their digital future. If you need any more resources, there's my website, and I will turn it back to Gilda for next steps.
Amy, outstanding. I'm thinking I've got so many notes here. I love what you said about you reassured us that there is just no perfect parenting around this landscape. We so need to hear that all screen time is not the same. Are they eating? Are they sleeping? Are they exercising? All kids are not the same. I love what you said about coming into their world, knowing the lingo, have them teach you. And we always hear, as you well know, the relationship is everything. So whether you're interested or not, let's look like we are. Let's ask those questions. You really hit on that. I loved what that diagram about the pathways and the boundaries simultaneously. That was a wonderful visual. What do you think? So many people that are listening here are wondering, how can I limit my child? What do we get wrong when we try to limit our child?
Ooh, that's such a great question, Gilda. I think when we try to limit our child, we limit both our um, both our belief in them because they feel that. We limit our ability to connect with them, and we limit our effectiveness at creating and raising confident children who can forge their own path. We know helicopter parenting has been around for a while, and as much as I would love to helicopter parent my child and prevent them from going to any wrong websites or seeing any bad content, I know that this is a losing proposition, and my better effort is when this happens, here's what you do about it. I love the moment when my younger daughter saw something inappropriate and she said, "Mom, I think that the website is popping up something. Can you help me get rid of it?" I was like, okay, that happened. Now what do we do? How did that make you feel? How do we prevent this? This is why we have limits. Let me help you so that you don't have to see stuff like that again. As opposed to, wow, you can't be online anymore because I don't think you can handle it, sends a message that you don't believe that your child has the resources or the internal resilience to handle this. Um, they may not yet at younger ages, but as they get older, we definitely want to build that in them.
Mm. And once again, that relationship that your child felt so comfortable, that is key, isn't it? Let's go to some of the questions here. Cheryl Lynn, you are up.
Thank you. Wow, what a great sharing of information. Thank you again, Amy. I especially loved the digital flourishing wheel that you said used to be the don'ts and now it's the do's. Flipping the narrative to the positive. My question around that it is it cheesy or is it appropriate to share that with your young person? Like I have a high school daughter. Like, can I pull up the wheel and say, "Hey, let's look at this together"? Or is it better as an adult for us to kind of review it and then put it in our own words to children? Can you talk to that just a little bit? Like, what's the best way for us to share that information without coming across as, clinical to our kids or something like that?
I hear what you're saying, and I want to share that there's actually simpler versions of the wheel that might be easier to share than others. If your child is of an age where they can handle that volume of content that's on that wheel, fantastic. But if they're younger and you're trying to just teach the basics of the concept, one of the things I like is just providing that framework that balance isn't just about simply feeling good or feeling bad, but rather that it is something that you can recalibrate. So, for instance, if your productivity is fantastic, you're feeling really focused, you're doing great at school, but maybe your mental health is suffering because you've been studying until the wee hours of the night. Well, this is good to be aware of, and then we reshift and we recalibrate, and it's something that there's a number of these wellness wheels out there that's been proven to see that when you have better self-awareness, that you have the language and the framework to readjust. If you don't have the language, you feel like you're just floating in a sea of emotions, but don't know why. So I would absolutely share it with them. The colors are bright and engaging, and it might be something you have to change the words for younger children, like productivity to like focus or something, to make it more palatable for them. But I do think it's helpful.
Thank
Good.
you. Thank you.
Nikki, I know Nikki Peterselli is a District 41 parent, and she is also one of the committee members of Glen Ellen Unplugged. Nikki, you have a question.
I do. And I struggle because I have a couple. This is all really awesome content. I think what I'm most curious about is with AI, it's something that I'm just starting to get a grasp on. I think most parents would feel that way. And I have my youngest is 9, my oldest is 21, and we have 2 in between there. So, um, I don't know if you can, but is there a good resource for me as a parent for elementary school age and the big guys to like help them navigate that, to educate both of us on the dangers?
So if it's educating about AI versus educating on AI about the dangers, those are maybe different resources. Um, so I would say the resources about AI are developing infinitely faster than the harms and potential risks for young people. I would say in the next 6 to 12 months, we'll probably see a lot more resources. Um, some of the places that I go for information are the Common Sense Media Lab, which is doing a lot of real-time research, also Hope Lab. Um, and the Digital Wellness Institute offers some, but not quite as much on AI quite yet. Personally, as a parent myself, I go to LinkedIn Learning. There's a huge suite of courses on AI just to familiarize with myself with the content so that I can then recognize the risks myself. But the world is moving so fast that the training programs haven't caught up quite yet. If other parents know of some resources, I would be all ears and would love to hear. Certainly something I'm working on developing as well. But I would say the first step before trying to find um, ways to watch out for the harms is to just get familiar with it yourself. If you haven't played with it very much, start out on ChatGPT, start just kind of playing with the tools. I know some schools are using Magic Schools, so teachers can explore some of the resources around that. But I imagine very soon we'll be seeing more, and I'm happy to share when I do find them.
Thank you.
There's a question in the chat about some suggestions of therapists or camps. I welcome you to email me at gilda_ross@glenbard.org, and I'll be happy to share that with you. Amy, you wrote an amazing book, The Future of Happiness. What if you were to write that book today, and you're working on another one, which sounds very, very important. I can't wait for that one. What would you change in that book that in terms of where we are today in the world?
There's a few things I would change. One of the things I would write more about AI. At the time I wrote the book, it came out in 2017. AI was just a blip, so I didn't see far enough in the future to forecast what was happening there. But I also mentioned a lot of tech and app devices, and it was the Internet of Things and sensors and Fitbit watches when the book came out. So there was a timestamp there. What I would have done differently is to reframe around timeless principles that we see again and again. And one of the things that has really come up for me recently in my research on AI is that we as society go through tech panic cycles almost predictably every
Mm,
15 years. Our last
mm,
one was the smartphone, and strangely enough, then came AI about 15 years later. Um,
mm,
and after AI will come the next thing. And so, if we have been through this over and over and over again, I would reinforce that we as humans have a propensity to feel afraid as opposed to get out in front and figure out a path to get ahead of whatever that technology might be. So being more proactive and less reactive, and also recognizing that fear is part of the process. It's innovation, it's creative destruction, it throws us into uncertainty. And we can learn how to sit in that uncertainty and learn with it as opposed to being afraid of it. So that would be the thrust. And it is part of why I'm writing Super Thinkers, is because I want us to think ahead. I want us to get even further ahead in thinking about, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to
mm,
react to this?
mhm, mhm. So let's say that you are in this formerly Sears Tower, and you see a parent and a child, and the child is on their phone, a teenager, and you can look in the parent's face and you can see that they're just despondent, really. Just this, I have just you can just see the loss of control that they're feeling, and you have to say something. You don't have a lot of time. What do you want them to know?
I would turn to the child on their device first and ask them what they're doing. I would engage
Mm,
them. Um, I would try to see what they're seeing of value in whatever they're engaging with. And
mm,
then I would pull the parent in and model how you can come alongside with creating conversation and drawing the child out so that if you can't take the device away, like that for whatever reason, then engage and try to draw. Um, a lot of parents are very afraid to take devices away from kids because they will create a scene in public. And there's such a
mm,
fear around that it is, oh my gosh, like, it's not good for the child, it's not good for me, so I won't do it. But it creates a behavior pattern that gets worse over time. So just as the same thing happens when our children are young and you kind of, whether you ground them for the first time or you take away privileges or, whatever it is, if you are able to nip it in the bud earlier, you save yourself so much time. So I might say, you have the power to set the rules. You are the parent. I encourage you to own this and to take responsibility for that.
This is our last question because I just looked at the clock and we're almost at our hour. What's the hardest thing for you as a parent as you struggle with these same issues we all do, and you have this range of beautiful children? What's the hardest thing for you, and how do you handle it?
I think the hardest thing for me would probably be, I'll just call it, I think right now it's Snapchat actually, because I know that the kids connect with their friends quite a bit through it, but because the messages disappear, there's a lot of conversation that I can't monitor. So it is finding that balance between letting them have Snapchat, but also not having the level of oversight that I want on it. Um, and the fact that the kids are, I would say the second thing is the kids are exploring at such a rapid rate with AI that there are things I learn every day that I have not ever heard of, and I'm catching up to them. So it takes a lot of time and energy to stay one step ahead of them. That is my challenge.
Mm, wonderful. You really reassured us. I have to say one other thing, I love that comment you made about you're reading your book and your kids. And I heard this from someone else we had a GPS who's talking about when you are working on that device, explain, I'm doing my banking now, this is for work, so they don't make that assumption. So much about AI that we really haven't talked about as yet, but we better learn so that we really can have those conversations with our children, because it's all about the conversations, isn't it, Amy?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Such a treat. Can't wait to
Thank
have you back already. Thank you
Oh,
so much.
thank
Thank
you.
you. This is where we go hug the kids. So we're going to go hug the kids.